5 hosts, 4 divisions, all battling it out for the Holy GrAHL of the American Hockey League, the Calder Cup. This is the Holy GrAHL podcast. Here are your hosts, Zack Power, Andrew Rinaldi, Corey Swartz, and Dina Weinheimer.
Hello there. Welcome to episode 62 of Field Pass Hockey's AHL podcast, the Holy GrAHL. That's GrAHL. This is the episode for April 14th, and we're here to give you a recap of the last week in AHL hockey. So to start off the show here, I'm Corey Swartz. We'll start with our introductory question, and if you guys could change one rule, what would it be?
General Swartz, you are a bold one. I'm glad you caught that reference. And any Star Wars nerds out there that are listening to me, Andrew Rinaldi, will hopefully have gotten that one as well. If I had to change a rule, I'm going to go in on it a little later on, but I want a 3-point system here in this league to put a bit more emphasis on the regulation wins, and that's a precursor to what I got coming up for you later on in the show.
Yeah, and I'm Zack Power. I got into it a little earlier on the podcast a couple weeks ago now. I really want to change the fighting in the last 5 minutes. I think that there's something to be said. I'm pretty old school. There's something to be said about protecting your honor. And if that needs to happen, the instigating part at least, because that's where it kind of stems back from. And it's an automatic 1-game suspension. I think there's something to be said about protecting your honor. And if it needs to happen in the last 5 minutes, well, it needs to happen in the last 5 minutes.
I feel like I'm a broken record here a little bit, guys, because I'm pretty sure I was thinking about this question. I'm pretty sure I said this last year at one point. If we had a similar question like this, I would get rid of the goalie trapezoid, man. I know that was made like specifically to nerf guys like Marty Brodeur and stuff like that back in the day. I'm all here for it though. Take the gamble, man. I'm not a gambling man myself, but I love the chaos. I am here for it. If a goalie wants to come out in the corner, I'm so sick of pucks dying in the corner on a penalty kill and having to watch the guy come all the way back. There was a great play at the Bears game I was at on Saturday where Zack Power got the puck and ripped a pass, basically Marty Brodeur style, to Hendrix Lapierre for one of his goals en route to a hat trick. And I was like, more of this, please. Like, let's not hamper these guys. We want to see a goalie go all the time, right? Let's get rid of the trapezoid, let them have it, you know? So we'll move right along here into the news recap of the week. I don't believe we have anything breaking at this time that we haven't really talked about so far, but Zack, I guess you're going to tee us up here from out in the Pacific Division.
Yeah, and I know we don't normally talk about players coming down, but this is such a significant player that we've been following when he was first here earlier on in the season. But a big addition for Coachella Valley and Shane Wright. I mean, the first-round pick, number 4 overall in the draft, and he had 4 goals in 5 games. Again, with the Coachella Valley. I know we got a couple of those against San Jose and Calgary earlier on in the season in his short stint, but he'll be joining the team and getting some much-deserved playoff hockey after his CHL team was eliminated.
That's definitely a huge add for a team that's already kind of, a heavyweight looking in the playoffs here. We'll take it back to the East here a little bit. Hershey Bears forward Hendrix Lapierre tallied his first professional hat trick. You just heard me talk about it a little bit on Saturday, which included the game winner in a 5-2 win over the Charlotte Checkers in Atlantic Division action. And speaking of the Atlantic Division, we had a weird night on Saturday, which saw all 4 of the remaining spots in the Atlantic get clinched all at the same time, courtesy of the Bridgeport Islanders getting thumped by the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins to officially join them on the golf course early here. But one of the teams, there's a couple of different playoff droughts that were broken in that span there. The longest one, of course, belonging to the Hartford Wolfpack, who punched their playoff ticket for the first time since 2015. It's almost been a decade since the Hartford Wolfpack were last in the playoffs. Some of the players in that alumni list that were with that last team to make it: Chris Bork, JT Miller, Jan Denis, Brady Skahey, and yes, Thomas Cabriolet were all alumnus of that team. It's been that long. It's hard to believe in some ways, but the Hartford Wolfpack are back in the playoffs. Lehigh Valley Phantoms are another team that has made it for the first time since 2018. Now, of course, a good chunk of that time is not their fault. But it's worth noting nonetheless that some of the different teams in the Atlantic Division are making it this year.
Wow, that's definitely interesting for sure. One player that's been making it all season long is Dustin Wolf, and he's been making it rain. The magical run for him continues following a win earlier this week to put him on an exclusive AHL list, a 40-win AHL season, which is seemingly harder and harder to do nowadays. Wolf is up there for his first time, of course, next to names like Johnny Bauer, who won it 4 times, Harvey Bennett, Gil Mayer, Marcel Pael, Jerry Cheevers, Ryan Miller, and Peter Budai, who are all on that list. And he got that win in a tough game against Coachella Valley, and he fought hard to do it.
And then some news came up last week that kind of beat our recording of the episode, but we're going to bring it up here now. Last Wednesday, the Wolves the announcement was made, I believe, on the Jeff Merrick show that they had reached out to all of the player agents that they won't be operating with an NHL affiliate next season. This is going to be the first team in the AHL in almost 30 years to work independently. Now, I don't know about you guys. This is unique for sure. The Wolves have kind of always had their bit of, they've always been the rebellious wild child from the IHL that's kind of always thrown a wrench in the plans of this league. And they've always kind of somehow made it work. But this is different. I don't know. This isn't your father's AHL, and this isn't the IHL. I'm not really sure how this is going to work out for them, but it hasn't necessarily been made official yet by the league. But Chicago seems pretty adamant that they're taking it's Jesus take the wheel for them at this point on.
And you know what? I know a few ECHL teams do it, and you'll be kind of stuck in a situation where, well, you can look at it in a couple ways. Players who just can't make the roster, that's where they'll end up going. And I think of a classic example of this was Jordan Binnington, who there was just no room on his team, and he ended up playing a year in Providence. And so you'll start to see a few more players like that. The goaltenders is kind of the easy one because there's only so many roster spots, and goaltending can be just so hard to come by, sometimes at least. But it'll be those sort of situations, and it'll be a good one for the AHL in that you'll get some of those ECHL call-ups. Instead of sending someone down, you might actually send them over to Chicago to get some more playing time, right? If you just don't have that roster spot, loan them over to Chicago, and fans can expect a couple different faces. And by a couple, I mean I expect to see a load of different players to come through there, either on loan or for that maternity leave contract, I guess, right? Where you're there for 20 odd games and that's about it, right? So, it might be a good opportunity to see some faces that you would have never seen before.
The other kind of side to it is like where are all the players from the Carolina Hurricanes going to go? This is a team that's, their system is 1 year removed from winning the Calder Cups. There has to have been some kind of huge, deal breaker between those two teams to, obviously it's been a bit of a down year in Chicago compared to, who could top last year, right? Like, that's a hard act to follow, certainly. But, to see that kind of direct change, you kind of wonder on the flip side, who's going to be the team that potentially benefits in the AHL, at least on paper, you would say benefits from having that dual affiliation. Obviously that doesn't, always work out in Calder Cups as we, obviously have last year to kind of analyze there too, but it throws off the map a little bit, right? Like what's the direction that the league's going to go in here? They just finally had 32 AHL teams for 32 NHL teams at long last. How is this issue going to get resolved? I think it's another interesting hurdle, and, does it open the door for more AHL teams? It'll be interesting to see where this, how everything shakes out going forward.
Scott Powers on The Athletic had a really good article on the whole matter. And one of the quotes from the Wolves GM was about, they want to develop players, but they also want to compete for Calder Cups, which is you've seen kind of Chicago really struggle early on this year, kind of taking them out of contention for the running for the Holy GrAHL here. But the last two awarded Calder Cups were Carolina affiliates. What do you? I feel like if you want to go for a cup, this is kind of your best bet here, right? But they know something that I don't, which probably is the case. But I'm still going to talk about it like I do anyway.
So to me, I don't have it in front of me. That would incite to me that Florida's sticking with Carolina, with Charlotte rather, right? And so I think that was a 2-year deal, if I remember correctly. And this is all off the top of my head. I could be completely wrong. But, I would like to think that Carolina would kind of go back to that well, right? They had such an established fan base in Charlotte. The jerseys even look like a Carolina Hurricane right now, right? Like, where do they expect them to go, right? I don't know. And I can't speak for Chicago fans, but they've had a lot of different affiliates over the years, right? And it's a great hockey market. The fans are so lively, right? And if I'm an NHL team, I'm salivating at the idea of going there, right? Like this is a market that likes their fan. Like you can get some AHL money from the fans and the revenue and the attendance and whatnot. I don't know. It's a strange situation.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see how the musical chairs settle themselves here, but we'll go to something much more solid and talk about our AHL Elite Prospect of the Week. And I believe, we're going to have you guys go in depth on that here next.
Yeah, we're gonna keep this in Chicago here. And this week's Elite Prospect is going to be none other than the Wolves' Ryan Suzuki. Now, with every game left on the schedule is just a must-win here for Chicago. Suzuki's taken his game to a whole other level. Over the last week, Suzuki's put up 3 goals and 1 assist in 3 games where the Wolves have collected 5 of 6 points in that race. And his week was punctuated by this incredible individual effort against the Iowa Wild. I mean, you see him attacking the neutral zone with speed, turns the defender inside out, and roofs it upstairs for the go-ahead goal. Now, that decision ended in an overtime loss there for the Wolves, but Suzuki's just been playing with confidence both with and without the puck, and these last few months is really kind of showing the hockey world what made him a first-round pick back in 2019 after a slew of injuries have kind of really stalled his development, but now you're kind of really seeing him start to break out here. And again, when the games mattered the most, he's found a way to take his game up another level, and it's been a lot of fun to watch him. You're seeing him. He's been definitely more of a distributor with the puck, but his shooting percentages have been way up there, and he just needs to just fire the puck a little more. And you've seen 3 goals over the weekend. It's hopefully it's a trend for him going into the last handful of games here.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, he's going to be a difference maker there for sure. And of course, all that data is courtesy of Elite Prospects. So another great shout out of thanks to them for sponsoring that segment. So we'll switch over here into, our kind of weekly segments we have lined up here for you. And so for mine's about photo finishes. Who doesn't like a photo finish? And, one of my great strengths, one of my favorite things to do is I quote a lot of SpongeBob, right? So, when I was thinking about this segment earlier and I was kind of thinking of a way to frame it, it kind of reminds me of that it's the episode about the Great Snail Race where it's Squidward and SpongeBob and Patrick, and they're all racing their snails against each other, except for Patrick's being a rock, of course. And, just kind of how long, it seemed like they were going 100 miles an hour, yet they're all going really slowly towards the finish. And, Patrick's rock ends up winning the whole competition, right? And we talked about it a little bit before in weeks leading up to this one here, of course, where the Atlantic Division's kind of like a big car wreck, right? And so, that kind of analogy combined with the, whole idea of that SpongeBob episode just kind of made me think of how the Atlantic is right now. We literally had the cars all crash at the finish line here and all locking up a playoff spot at the same time. But these are 4 teams that are essentially tied in the standings right now. So it's, you can breathe a little bit easier, sleep a little easier at night if you're some of the coaches, I guess, considering that some of the, your team has locked in a playoff spot. You don't have to worry about that. This isn't 2019 all over again where, only the top four teams make it and 2 teams are just going to be left in the dust here a little bit. You at least have the benefit of knowing for sure you're at least going to be able to decide it in head-to-head action here. But the placement's wide open here. I mean, you have 3 teams tied at 80 points. And, Hartford's right there at 79. They're salivating. They're the Rocky of this story where, they could just come from absolutely nowhere. You're not sure how, you're not sure why, but they could take this. They could move up to 3rd place, which would be amazing given they spent so much time in the basement of the division. And they're kind of the team that nobody really wants to play right now. I mean, they're, on a 7-game winning streak. They could possibly make it 9 if they win their last 2 games here. They have the disadvantage of only having 2 games left as opposed to 3 for most everybody else in the division right now. So that's kind of the big disadvantage. But I think their strength of schedule is a little bit better too. It's not like Springfield where they have the unenviable task of playing Providence in 2 of their last 3 games here at the end of the weekend, of course. So it's going to be an interesting battle. And, there's some teams like, Charlotte's kind of, cooled off a little bit. I think that, Lehigh Valley could be considered in that same group where they've just kind of in a little, same with Springfield in a lot of ways, just the way the math is kind of combined to, make this a totally even game is just insane to me. It's been insane that we've kind of had this all season long, and it's probably going to be a race that gets decided, beyond the 72 game season coming to a conclusion on Sunday where, we're truly just not going to know. It's again, another great instance, maybe the only great instance in the AHL for that expanded playoff format being a really good gimmick to have, honestly, even though I don't know anybody that really wants to play in the best of 3s, but that should be fascinating hockey in the Atlantic this season, particularly compared to last year. I'm curious to see if anybody can pull off an upset here. And, I think this last week is going to be something really interesting to watch towards keeping this thing. Of course, I'm sure you guys are probably going to talk about some races that maybe aren't as close in other divisions here. But in the Atlantic, it's been a chess battle. And I've been very cautiously optimistic to see how it's going to end and how things are going to go here.
Yeah, and I think that's important too when you're talking about cautiously optimistic, especially in the North Division, and the final spots are still up for grabs. And before I kind of get your guys' thoughts on this, I do want to go over the rundown, and I do want to talk about Toronto for a quick moment before we talk about the bottom 3. Toronto's still in that first spot. They have 88 points, of course. Not to start the last 10 that they've wanted, really. Rochester coming in there with an excellent last 10, by the way. They've gotten points in 10 straight games, if you can believe that or not. Syracuse is also not doing too bad. They've kind of split their past 10 right now, but they're still in a playoff spot. They're 1 point behind Rochester right now. If you look, those are the top 3, and those all have playoff spots locked in and confirmed as of right now. Utica is in that 4th place spot. They're expected to kind of get into the playoffs as of right now. They have a 6-point lead on Laval. So as of right now, they're looking set to get in. You look at the bottom 3, it's Laval, Cleveland, and Belleville. We'll talk about them just a moment. You look at the Toronto Marlies. I want to get this in. It's not the past 10 that they've wanted to look at. It's a 1-6-2-1. So they've won 1 game in their past 10. So another team that's also doing that right now is San Diego. So you don't really want to be putting yourself on the same pedestal as them. Their most recent game, or one of their most recent games against the Utica Comets, was an absolute disaster for them. A 5-0 finish. Shots on goal after that, 42-20. There was 20 shots on goal by Utica in the first period alone. Things just aren't looking too good. There's not a solid goaltender. They're not playing as a team, and they're rattled. That's the main thing that I want to get out of there. But I do want to get your guys' thoughts on the bottom 3 right now in the North Division.
Well, I see Laval is up and they're just hammering away at Wilkes-Barre, so they got a win there. Cleveland got another win tonight here. We are recording on Monday. It's a little unusual for us, but hey, I like the vibe. And so they're keeping pace, just a handful of games left. Laval, though, just got some huge reinforcements. Caden Primo's coming back, along with Raphael Harvey Pinard. I believe there was another name there, but it's blanking on me. D's going to kill me, but forgive me. That's all I can ask. And, in a tight race like this, like those are the kind of moves that just push the needle just a little more over. And it's hard to bet against the Rocket right now. I mean, you feel like they got a little bit of momentum, and just those are big ads. I can't downplay it enough. In a league where you're constantly juggling like that, you get a couple games with Raphael and then Caden Primo backstopping you. If it's Caden Primo from what we've saw a lot of last year. This year he's been a little shaky, but he's also been juggled up with the Habs and everything. So it's probably not fair to put that all on him when you can't really get comfortable with your game and you gotta, play here or play there. Now I know, the puck looks the same and all, we all hear all that, but it is difficult to go back and forth in between one league and the other. You got up in Montreal, you have little to no defense, and then you're coming back to Laval and trying to play in the same style. It's easy to mess with your head. But I mean, Cleveland's not going away quietly. They fell behind against Grand Rapids tonight, and it's Grand Rapids. I understand, but 2 points is 2 points, and they found a way to get back and to get the win out of that. And it's a regulation win. Again, we'll talk more about that. But it's, I don't have their schedules ahead of me here, but thankfully kind of Zach's giving me some help here. But, but when you have Belleville kind of hanging around, but then they're smelling blood in the water with Toronto playing the way that Toronto is, can you really count them out yet?
Yeah, that's kind of the big thing, right? Like you look at their series, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, Belleville and Toronto, and I think they kind of split, but Belleville looked just so sharp in that first game, and that's what's going to come down to is Toronto's rattled, right? The last time that they have won a game really was against Belleville, right? And in their past 10 games, that was the only game that they've won, was that game against Belleville. So I don't know. It's so tough. And, obviously as we record this on Monday, there's obviously a different result with Toronto and Laval facing against each other. But, looking at some of those weekend games, Syracuse and Laval are going to take on each other. It's Cleveland and Utica on Friday as well. Belleville at Rochester. And so Belleville's kind of coming in here doing a 3-3 to kind of end off the season. So Rochester playing the way they are, if they can gas Belleville in that first game, I mean, what does the last two kind of look like, right? Cleveland's going to go against Rochester, and they're also going to go against them on Sunday. So Cleveland might be looking at a gassed Rochester team, right? So this balance of scale, if I'm going to be honest, the schedule for the bottom, like the end of the season, is wide open. It's anybody's game, right? Especially considering that Laval has games against Toronto and Syracuse left, right? Syracuse is a great team, but Laval's got that piece that they can probably find a way to pull together a win. Cleveland, they're going to go against the gas Rochester team. If Belleville can manage to put some brakes on them in that first game of the 3-on-3, they have a chance, right? But they got to leave something for Toronto on the back end, right? So it's going to be interesting how it all kind of plays out, right, on where the schedule kind of lands and who will get what.
The thing for Belleville is who's going to be in net.
Well, they got 10 goalies to choose from.
So, you get those packed in games, and you could have another guy on a ATO coming in and be like, all right, he's the guy in that tonight. He's our guy. And do you think that they kind of just notice anymore? Like,
So right now, currently on their active roster, Levi Merlainen is still considered on their active roster, the rookie goaltender. Dylan Ferguson, who kind of had that improbable run, kind of fell off the face of the earth since. And they also have Antoine Bibeau, who's started more games than anybody else with 23 starts. The goaltender who started the most has 23 starts. Which is kind of crazy to think about. An 8-9
their only
force.
qualified goalie is the empty net.
It's always there. But
They've had 45 minutes of empty net time. That's kind of crazy to think about. I don't know if that's good or bad, but like, I've never really thought about it that way. They have 45 minutes of empty net time.
The one thing I think is interesting and worth bringing up here is, like, the NHL season, if you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe ends on Thursday, right? So or at least it's, the majority of the teams that I follow finish up on Thursday at least. But, whose teams, whose affiliates are playoff bound and who's not, and who plays games after that timeline. Because I think that changes up the fortunes of a team like, say Cleveland. They just seem to have gotten absolutely hammered by recalls and, personnel losses. Like, it's hardly even their team left at this point. If, last I heard, at least, of course, things change so fast anymore type of thing that, they could suddenly get all of those guys back and be, if they could put the pieces together, maybe push for that last spot, even with, other teams. I don't think Montreal is a contender, if I'm not mistaken. There's some other teams in that mix that, could be in a similar boat and bolster their teams up a little bit. But suddenly you're thinking to yourself, it's almost a great perk if your team's not in it all of a sudden for this weekend to try and keep your hopes alive for maybe one last gasp at it if you're on the outside looking in, maybe.
There's the pros and cons with that. Because, I mean, I'm looking over at my own beat, like, everyone in Carolina is panicking about who their goaltender is going to be going into game one. A lot of voices coming out of North Carolina want Pyotr Kochetkov to start game one, which I don't know if that's talk about it.
Strategy, Cotton.
Yeah, talk about a trial by fire. Like, you have two ready NHL vets, and you want to go to the bullpen here. It's a little crazy over in Caneland lately, but you look at the Marlies, right? Like, all you have to do is survive until the NHL moves into the second round. You're probably getting some guys back, right? Another casual first round shot at the Leafs. Belleville, I mean, Ottawa's already eliminated, right? So,
but see, Ottawa's doing typical Ottawa things and kind of recalling players. Right. This is the funny part, because Ottawa does this every year. I know this. Right. They don't make the playoffs as per usual, and then they'll start calling up all the players. Oh, come get some. You want some NHL experience? Come on up. And there's nothing left in Belleville. Right. So if there's nobody left, right, and you have to go back to these ECHL startups, like, I don't know.
There was a lot of that in San Jose as well. I follow a couple Sharks, or more CUDA fans, and it was like right as you're getting into like that dog race in there with Tucson for that last spot, and you want your prospects to get into a playoff run that San Jose hasn't really had in a little while. We're gonna call up Kyle Criscolo. We're going to call up Daniil Gushin. We're going to call up Thomas Bordeleau. And the CUDA are just going to be SOL. And you're just going to have to deal with it. And that's the nature of this league, man. It's not fair to a lot of these teams here. But you take it up with the parent club. That's all I can say. We talked continuously about wanting to get your prospects into playoff runs. Well, when you call up a whole forward line, it makes it so much harder, especially for a team like the CUDA, who are kind of already behind the 8-ball as is. And you got to go up against like an Abbotsford or Colorado to keep your playoff hopes alive. Good luck. But we got to keep more in the north here as we, but it's good to bring examples from outside and then look at our bottom 3 teams here. I know we kind of said it before, where it's like, okay, if you had to pick the one team to get that last spot, who's it going to be? And right now, I believe it just updated with Cleveland up there with 71 points and Laval at 70. They're both 6-4 in their last 10. We know who they got going up in there. And you got Belleville hanging around, doing Belleville things, playing Toronto. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Cleveland finding a way to get points against Rochester? Is it going to be Laval going in against their nemesis there in Syracuse? Is it going to be Belleville just throwing a wrench in the whole thing? I legitimately, it's hard to pick.
It's going to be an interesting one.
I don't know if I can put my good name out there and pick a team just to watch him founder and fall down at the bottom. So I won't. I'll just say I hope everyone has fun, and I'm gonna look over here at the Central instead, and the North is just gonna do the North things and be pure chaos as it's always been. But over in the Central, we can just take a look over here at the quick standings. I'm going to throw a bit of a stat out here that you might not hear a lot, but is going to be important to this segment. So number 1, we have the Texas Stars over there with 88 points with 30 regulation wins. And just wins in regulation, no extra time, overtime, shootout, none of that. It's at 60 minutes, third period end, you win the game. Milwaukee, they're at 86 points, right behind them with 29 regulation wins. Third place, you have the Manitoba Moose, as endearing as always, with 79 points, 26 regulation wins. Fourth place, Iowa Wild, 76 points, 23 regulation wins. Rockford Ice Hogs over there in the 5th spot with the last playoff spot, 73 points, 17 regulation wins. 6th place, Chicago, right behind them, 72 points, 28 wins in regulation. That's a whole 11 points more so. Or 11 wins more so, not points. No, the points, we'll get to that. And then you got the Grand Rapids Griffins with 64 points. They're way out of it. 19 wins in regulation. It's ugly over on the west side of Michigan. But I'm looking at these standings and just how crazy it's kind of come down here to the wire. And the big one that stands up to me is Rockford. Now, I have a bit of a magnifying glass kind of on the Ice Hogs, mostly because my beat is chasing them for that last playoff spot. So I'm inherently looking at this team and just seeing like what kind of abnormalities can I find in there. And then that popped in. I have been pretty vocal, I think, in my distaste for 3-on-3 hockey. It's better than the shootout. Yes, I know that it's here so that we see less shootouts and we don't have shootouts deciding games, especially at this point of the season. You don't want your playoff hopes to hinge on what's in essence a skills competition, And that being said, I think that I don't want to say that 3-on-3 hockey is gimmicky, but I think as we've kind of now seen, it can feel that way a bit, especially when in 2 weeks we're not going to see any of that. It has its place in here to kind of prevent shootouts from happening, and it's hockey. It's not true to form hockey, but it's a form of hockey that is not going to lead us down that dark hole that Gary Bettman built for us in 2005, but is going to give us at least a result. That being said, I think I look over towards our European allies and I see their love for the game of I'm still going to call it soccer, even though I'm referencing football. And, they have that wonderful 3-point system where it's, you win, it's 3 points, you tie, it's 1 point. Apparently that third point just goes bye-bye. And then if you lose, you get nothing. Good day, sir. And I would like something like that kind of implemented here in order to, reward teams for finishing with those W's in that allotted 60 minutes of time. Because you're handing out points in this 3-on-3 style that's not going to get you anywhere once the playoffs start. You're in overtime, it's back to 5-on-5. You're even strength, you gotta work for it. It's more of my traditionalist hockey mind at heart here. And I know it's going to come off as me trying to hype up the Wolves, like, oh, they should be in third place. They have the third most. It's kind of mind-boggling that they have 28 regulation wins, which is just 1 behind the Admirals in second place and 2 behind the Stars in first place. The Wolves like to win in 60 minutes, and I got to give them props for that. It's not just about them, though. It would shift the whole dynamic of the standings, not just in the Central, but then you're looking at Abbotsford being above the Colorado Eagles. You're looking at Bakersfield being higher than the Ontario Reign. And, geez, you're looking at Rockford only has 2 more regulation wins than the San Diego Gulls. Think about that for a second. San Diego. The team of all teams, the absolute harbinger of bad. Just 2 more than that. And I mean, if it ends up that way, that Rockford finishes over the Chicago Wolves, I promise I won't be salty, no matter how, I know I'm starting to sound a little salty as I get on here a little bit, just like maybe a dabble. You gotta have a little salt with your steak, but I feel like there's a lot of teams out there. It's not just Rockford. They're just the outlier. I've had my crosshairs on Rockford for like 2 months now. I'm just going to keep it going. Where I feel like you're kind of living on these 3-on-3 points, and it's good. It's going to get you into the playoffs, and you're going to feel good about yourself. And then you're going to go into an area where you can't depend on spinning around in the neutral zone until a lane opens up and you have a really quick guy who just makes it happen. This is where the gimmick kind of comes into play here. So this whole rant is about, I think we've been looking for ways to kind of avoid these situations, kind of determining teams' fates here at the end of the season. And I would like the regulation wins. We have them as a tiebreaker, but that's really the only weight that they have. And I would like to give them a little more weight. If you win without overtime, you should be rewarded. And you know what? I want to see some crazy stuff, like teams at the end of the season trying to win. You're tied 3-3 and you pull your goalie. Some real Sergei Fedorov from the Russian league stuff. That's the kind of stuff that I want to see here. Maybe not. Maybe kind of tone that down a little bit. Though every time Sergei did that, I'm just kind of like, oh, what are you doing? But, I got just a little bit of ingenuity to it. And I think it adds a whole different dynamic. And again, don't anchor your hopes to 3-on-3 hockey. It'll get you to the postseason, but once you're there, you're going to kind of wish like, oh, maybe we should have played better 5-on-5. That's all I have for this week.
For sure. Well, I know for me, they just came on the loudspeaker in the store, okay? Attention shoppers, the Calder Cup store will be closing in 15 minutes. Please follow your purchases to the front. Okay. Now, in the Calder Cup store, 10 teams entered this a few months ago. Only 7 are going to come out with purchases. Now, Calgary and Coachella Valley didn't even hear the announcement. They have the car started and they're already flying. And whether or not there's a case for losing things in the cart along the way, that's a completely different story. But when you have Calgary, who's gotten points in 13 straight and haven't lost a game at home since before March 7th, I think you're kind of okay. Coachella Valley is in that 100-point club, and they've loved the help throughout the season from Potts, Lind, and Cormick. McCormick and Lind are in the top 12 for points right now in the AHL. Their inactive goalie Joey DeCord is the fourth best GAA in the league, and they've got to make sure they got the receipt for their purchase. Otherwise, they're stuck with Chris Gibson. But at least they found a straggler out in the parking lot in Shane Wright. Hey, Colorado had their runners on in November, and which helped them get some early points on for that third place spot. On point, getting 13 out of 14 games in November, getting points, by the way, with only one regulation loss during that stretch. And they're 3-2 in April so far, so they're looking for a little bit of momentum. But hey, they got out before the final call. Abbotsford wasn't really running while they're going around this hypothetical store, but they had their head high enough on the cash register that they managed to make it, getting points at all but 4 in the closing time in March. A team that's had their running shoes on, and now but when you look at them before, they were wearing flats. They were 9-9 heading into December, and now you're talking about a high-level playoff team who could just be the dark horse of the playoffs. Who knows? Right? And Ontario has been doing some shopping as well. I think it's important to kind of recognize that as well. They've been doing it with rubber boots and a wheel missing in their cart. Okay, these guys, they don't shop in an efficient manner. These guys got lost along the way. Arguably one of the best startups out of the gate, and they look so promising with that 6-1 record. But they're now 4-5-1 in their past 10 games. The change has been goaltending. The wheel that was lost on the shopping cart was Phoenix Copley, who backstopped them through the first chunk of the season. Is a .906 save percentage enough from Cal Peterson to get him there? Well, they're out of the store at least, I guess, right? What can you say? The next two showed up for the seniors discount, okay, and managed to get out because the bottom three didn't even show up with their wallet, and they were shopping around with a cart with no bottom, and they had nothing to check out with, right? Bakersfield has shown some signs of improvement. We talked about it earlier this week on the pod, and I think the week before as well, so I'm not going to go back into it. Their last month has been pretty solid despite losing the last 2 games earlier in this week. Tucson had the boogie because the bingo game was about to start, and old Gladys had to move her tennis ball walker there because their sub 500 record snuck them into the playoffs somehow because of this godforsaken division format that I don't want to get into again. They didn't work to win. They lost 6 of their last 10 games, and that's been the story of their season. But you know what? Sometimes when you only win 4 to 10, you make the playoffs, and that's kind of what we have here. I don't want to go back any further into that. San Jose came in like bolt, starting out the top of their division. You know, they were running around the store, and they in like 10 minutes they had enough to kind of fill the baby section in the cart, you know, the top, right? But they ran out of steam. They realized, well, there's nowhere else to put anything in my cart. I got everything in the baby section, and they started losing after that, right? And now look where they are. They didn't make a playoff spot, not even close. I'm not going to get started on Henderson, who's behind them. San Diego, I will for one final time, just for old time's sake. Kick the horse while it's down. San Diego has been statistically the worst team in the AHL to ever play in the modern era, and that's a proven fact. I've done my research and homework on this. They've only won 1 game in their last 10, but hey, I guess they're up there with the Toronto Marlies, so one and the same. Hey, they didn't show up to the store with their wallet, and that's for sure. The team that lost, you know, it's not even the same team that they have today. They picked up stars along the way, which is quite impressive. And I'll list off some of them. Michael Delzato, Dylan Sekera, Chase Prisky, Josiah Slavin, and Andre Schuster were all added to their teams at some point throughout the season, which is actually kind of sad, right? Like they had the shopping cart filled with stuff, and then by the time they got up to the cash register, the lights were off in the store and everybody was gone home. And if this was a 100-game season, I think that they'd make it no problem. But guess what? You're too little, too late. Turns out bulking up in March and February doesn't do it justice. So here we are. I want to go back down the run order one more time. All teams have made the playoffs here. Calgary, Coachella Valley, Colorado, Abbotsford, Ontario, Bakersfield, and Tucson, San Jose, Henderson, and San Diego have all not made the playoffs.
And don't forget, they had Rocco Grimaldi in San Diego. Like, he was over a point a game, and
He was their best. He was their best.
By
He's
far
gone.
the best.
He's gone. And everybody, and that's the other side of it too. They've called up Dostal to Anaheim, and Anaheim, for good reason, start throwing everybody up in the NHL, right? They have no chance, right? What can you do, right? This is statistically the worst team to play in the modern era of the AHL, and I say that post lockout 05. So.
As a former grocery store employee of 5 years, I appreciated that entire segment, especially thinking of the grocery carts, because some of those teams got the misfortune of getting the grocery carts all stuck together. They got the squeaky wheel, the one that's spinning off by itself, the whole 9 yards there. So I appreciated every second of that segment there for sure. So we'll move it along here into a little bit more predictions for the rest of the week here, starting with our game of the week segment. I believe is what we'll shift to here next. And for me, I mean, we'll start with the Atlantic Division here. And for me, I'm just gonna say all of them. I don't have a free game of the week for you guys just yet. We're recording ahead of that being announced here, so I'm just gonna say if you're watching this weekend, you're just gonna want to buy the all-day pass and just watch as many games as you can, honestly, because it's all interdivisional play this week. No North Division opponents to be found here. It's all teams that are it's essentially playoff hockey here, basically, for a lot of teams that are looking to either solidify their spots in the case of like Hershey and Providence, if they're hurtling towards a matchup with each other in the division finals, possibly, you'll want to have that home ice advantage, although there's no head-to-heads there, of course. Teams like Springfield, they're trying to get back on track. They're playing Providence a couple of times. You can't look past Lehigh Valley or Hartford, even trying to push up there. And in the middle of all that, Charlotte too. So there's teams like everybody's got their own little storyline, right? Like if you're Charlotte, you really don't want to fall down to not have home ice advantage in that first round, because with the travel, I mean, there's a good chance that they had to play 2 games on the road in a row. You could possibly look at not even seeing your home crowd if you get beat in 2 games straight. So there's a lot on the line in those little respects. And of course, Charlotte's great at being road warriors, being so disconnected from the rest of the division at times. So I'm really looking forward to seeing all of these teams play. I'm just here for the chaos, and I'm going to be enjoying it all weekend long.
Yeah, this is all about chaos this time of the year. And especially in the Central, I mean, every game except Grand Rapids games. Well, Grand Rapids games will matter against the opponents they're playing. But anyway, everything has implications at this point. And it's difficult for me to pick this without knowing the result of Tuesday's game between the Wolves and Rockford, which I don't know about you guys. Personally, for me, this is going to be the biggest single game that I've been covering this team since the Calder Cup Finals last year. So, which, thanks again, Corey, for the assist on that one while I was out on vacation. But I'm still going to have to go with, I think, Sunday's game with Rockford going into Milwaukee. It's got implications for both teams. No matter what that result is on Tuesday, Rockford is probably going to be playing for their playoff lives. Milwaukee is going to be gunning for that number 1 seed. Both of these teams are going to be out here just pulling and tugging at other sides of the standings, but just in desperate need for those points all the way down to the wire. Every point is going to matter by the end of this. So again, kind of what, was alluded to earlier, pick your poison. I'm going to be in Chicago to watch them play the Griffins and the Moose. Those are going to be huge games with implications for 2 of the 3 teams that I mentioned. I'm sorry, I just gotta dig at the Griffins while I still can. It's there's not much time left. I mean, over the next couple months, they're just going to be in the rearview mirror. So you can
maybe we'll do one more show before the season's over. Maybe like we'll figure out something next week, and we'll just do one show where we bash on everybody who didn't make the playoffs. Maybe that's what we need to do. And I can make the
Oh,
executive
boy.
decision here. I think we should do it.
That would be a great weekly segment. They're just like we do like obituaries for each of the teams that didn't make it before we get into the actual playoff action. That's why I love where you're heading with that one.
Hey, I could have fun bashing on the Bridgeport Islanders for a number of different reasons here. In Wilkes-Barre, too. I mean, sheesh, that would be a fun segment for me. I'd have a lot of fun with that.
Didn't they have Corey Schneider this year?
They did, but it didn't help them out at all. I mean, between him and Jakub Skarek, I mean, it's just been mediocrity this year from the two of them. And, the Islanders can maybe hang that "we shut out the Hershey Bears and their teddy bear toss" thing. That'll be their banner that they can hang on this season. It's probably the only shutout they had all season long. And just by the reactions for it, I mean, that was their crowning achievement this season. So, I mean, they had all the pieces. They were in third place for a long time, but they absolutely fumbled the bag. And, when your season culminates in the long since eliminated Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins that are playing an ECHL team, dummying you 8-2, where Schneider and Skarek both allow, multiple goals apiece, where it's to the point where it's hard to figure out who's going to get assigned the loss here, because they're both awful and they both deserve to have a loss. Your goose is cooked. I don't know what else to tell you, unfortunately, but
this is a preview for next week. I love it.
Like I said, I have a lot of fun with that, because that would be their banner I would give them. Honestly, I'm giving away too much of next week's show, but I could go just say it all over again. I'll have too much fun with this one.
Oh, I love it.
I'll let you get the final word on the Central Division before I tell you about the Pacific.
Like I said, pick your poison. I'm going to be looking. The thing when you're trailing in a playoff chase is that you're going to be scoreboard watching. So I'm going to be tuned in to Rockford and Milwaukee on that one.
Sure. And I'll tell you a little bit about the Pacific Division. There's nothing really to I don't want to say there's nothing to look forward to, but you're kind of playing for brownie points at this point, right? Most of the playoff seeds are kind of just set in stone right now. There's nothing really that can change. Maybe Calgary and Coachella Valley, but we'll see what happens there. I can't really see much happening if we're going to be a realist about this. And I want to look at Calgary this weekend, and Calgary is facing Abbotsford twice, which is going to be a pretty good matchup all the same for both sides. Calgary has been pretty good heading into this, and I've talked about how well that they've been doing over the past while. We have to remember the Pacific Division is ending on Saturday, and Calgary is playing on Friday and Saturday in that series there. Both games are in Abbotsford. This is the last time you'll see Calgary, at least until the second round comes in, or whatever. What are they calling it nowadays? The division semifinals. That's what they're calling it. It's not the first round. So they'll play against the lowest seed of the first round winner. However way you want to look at that. So that's either going to be Coachella Valley, Tucson, Colorado, or Bakersfield in that one there. Or even any of them, actually, by the looks of it. I'm sorry, I don't understand how this playoff thing works, by the way. It could be any of the teams in the Pacific Division. That's what I was trying to say here. Yeah, this will be the last time that you'll see them. And so, yeah, this is a good chance to see some last-minute Dustin Wolf. I also do want to mention as well, because I also did notice this, that we do have hockey on the Field Pass Hockey app for the final time. Believe it or not, this is your last chance to check out some regular season action on the Field Pass Hockey app for the 2022-23 regular season. We're back in Pennsylvania when the Checkers take on the Phantoms at 7:05 on Friday. We'll also be around Saturday for some more action, as well as the Charlotte Checkers will be going against the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. That's at 6:05. So we're ending off the season in a bang. But you know what? We will be back for some playoff action right here in the Field Pass Hockey app, because it looks like it looks like Charlotte is making their way into the playoffs. So we'll have some playoff action for you there, and we'll tell you about that when the time comes. But in the meantime, you could check out those two games on the Field Pass Hockey app on the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store.
All right. So for our last segment, I think Andrew was the winner of our bonus round from last week. So let's see, Andrew, what you got for us this time?
All right. Now, I think it was one of my last one of my couple last hot takes where I pretty much said that Dustin Wolf was going to win the MVP of this league this year. I mean, he was goaltender of the year last year, and his numbers are just even better than that. He's been absurd. He's hit the 40-win plateau. He's already got 100 wins in his AHL career, and he barely is old enough to buy a beer. So he's been impressive to say the least. But I was looking back, and it was also curious because this ties in with our Hartford Wolfpack talk about them getting their first playoff berth in a long time. And I was looking at the last goaltender to win the MVP in this league. And I was wondering if either of you guys knew who that was. No, they were not on that list of 40-win goaltenders, I'm afraid. But they came pretty close.
And it ties into the Hartford Wolfpack, you said.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I could see him.
I should remember this.
Oh my God, I know exactly who you're talking about too. Oh my God, and it's not Cam Talbot.
It's not Cam Talbot.
Oh my God.
Oh, I can't think of it.
He played in the mid 2010s, didn't he? We're talking like 15, 16, 14 area, right?
No, you got to dial it back a little further. There hasn't been a goalie to win the MVP in the AHL since 2003, 2004.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
That blows
With the
out any
Rangers.
guesses I had.
Yeah, definitely.
Sheesh.
Well, I'm trying to think about who the Rangers had in the pipeline at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Sabrin?
I think he was in Pittsburgh around that time. I could be wrong, but...
Or Blackburn would be the only two that I could think of.
I'll give you bonus points for Blackburn because the dual blocker system. That's something I wish succeeded. Like, that would have been fantastic. I'll give Corey a little bit more on this. Maybe Zach can...
Ties into Hartford, though. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I literally don't remember anything about Hartford from back then.
Yeah, I'm kind of dating myself because I'm like yeah, I might have been able to snipe that one, but in 2003, 2004, Hartford Wolfpack goaltender Jason LaBarbera won the MVP. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Well, then, if I rewind it back to the next, I'm just going to give you. Jeez. I'll toss this one up to Corey. In 97, a Hershey Bears goaltender won the MVP. Do you know who that was?
Oh, that'd be JF Labe easily.
Okay, well, that was too easy. I couldn't give Zach any. I'll throw Zach one. I'm looking at the MVP list here.
I will say, in the meantime, the goaltender I was thinking of, who was, in my opinion, exceptional for the Wolfpack, was Magnus Hellberg, who played really well and stole a lot of games for the Wolfpack. So, and he was playing around 2015, 2016, 17 area.
He had a cup of coffee with the Griffins here this year. I enjoyed interviewing him. He was the one where I got that quote earlier where I was asking him, like, about his, because I believe he started the season in Ottawa and he got claimed by Seattle on waivers, and then Seattle put him on waivers, and Detroit grabbed him up. And so I was asking him, I was like, is it kind of chaotic for you? And he was like, it doesn't matter where I'm at. The puck looks the same. And I was like, that's a great quote.
That's a great quote.
It was a great quote. I still want to give Zach a chance here to maybe steal one away. Okay, I'll go just because I'm looking at, I see TJ Tynan went back-to-back. Now, I'm not going to ask you who went back-to-back. I'm just going to say in 85 and 86, Paul Gardner went back-to-back. Could you name what team he was on? At least the second year.
Oh, it was either I'm going to say Newmarket, or it was St. Catharines at that time.
In 84-85, he was on the Bingo Whalers, the Binghamton Whalers, and then
Really?
85-86,
Bingo Whalers,
the Bingo Whalers. And in 85-86, it was the Rochester Americans. So
dang, because I knew he played on the Maple Leafs for a little bit, so I figured that he was messing around in their farm system.
yeah, good old Paulie Gardner, and his Wikipedia is showing a beautiful handlebar mustache. We love to see it, but I guess with JF LeBay, I'm going to give the W to Corey here.
Oh, are you sure? I was about to say, Zach hasn't had one in a minute, I feel like.
I can toss
You
him,
want to be schooled by some
I
Canadian
can toss
trivia?
him a pity bonus win, but if we want to avoid more Hershey Bears trivia next week, we could probably pass it over.
I am the Tucson Roadrunners of the bonus round. You know, it was very much a petty playoff spot, and I'll take it.
He still gets it. It still counts in the books. That's what matters.
Zach, you can have it this week. I want to get some Canadian trivia here, man.
There we go.
Sounds good. We'll talk about some terrible Canadian teams for our terrible teams podcast episode next week.
Oh, I love it.
Also, I want to number how many different names of teams has Binghamton had over the years? Because that's I didn't even know that last bit there. Like I swear to you, I have an old puck. I wouldn't know this if I didn't have an old puck somewhere over here. It's a Binghamton Rangers puck. The Binghamton Senators. Like, how many different Binghamton teams? How many names have they gone through up there? Like, it's insane to think of. I can think of at least 4 or 5 now off the top of my head. Maybe that's a great bonus round question to have here. I didn't think of.
Yeah, except I'm already looking it up, so maybe.
Yeah, we're both looking it up. Desperately looking for you here, man. I don't know, and I said it last week too. I miss having the opportunity to just say bingo all the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess we'll call it quits here for now, gentlemen, but thank you all for tuning in. That's it for this episode of the Holy GrAHL. That's GRAHL. If you want to see or hear more of us, please subscribe to the channel on YouTube or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at the Holy GrAHL. It's GRAHL again. You can check out all of Field Pass Hockey's other podcasts. Join Matthew Harding and Jason Mouse as they break down the ECHL's Wichita Thunder and chat with some of the team's legendary players. The Rolling Thunder podcast airs bi-weekly on Field Pass Hockey. There's also Syracuse Speaks with Alexandra Ackerman. Syracuse Speaks is a Syracuse Crunch-centric podcast that focuses on maintaining a balanced perspective in the ever-shifting world of minor league hockey. And on behalf of all of us here at the Holy GrAHL, we hope you have an amazing week, and we will see you next week.
This has been the Holy GrAHL Podcast. Have a question or topic suggestion? Hit us up on Twitter or drop us an email. For the latest news across the American Hockey League and the rest of minor league hockey, download the Field Pass Hockey app, now available in the Apple and Android app stores.
I found that they had a team called the Dusters.
Yeah.
I think that counts for bonus points.
That's a great name.
Yep. The Dusters, the Binghamton Whalers, then the Rangers. Then the Rangers became the Wolfpack, and then you had to go all the way to the PEI Senators, then became the Bingo Senators.